Good morning to those of you in Seoul, and good evening to those viewers in the US. My name is Steve Park, and I'm the General Chair of TRIFORM. For those of you unfamiliar with TRIFORM, it is a policy network established by experts, opinion leaders from the Republic of Korea, United States, and Japan. Our mission is to provide a platform to share insights and collaborate on solutions to address key common challenges. Today, we have prepared a very special webinar in collaboration with TVCHOSUN in light of President Trump's return to power. We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to TVCHOSUN for making this event possible. As many viewers are aware, 2025 presents South Korea and the US with several challenges, some new and some old. From his first day in office, President Trump has put out a number of major initiatives that would affect South Korea. And likewise, South Korea at this time is going through some challenges of its own, mainly political turmoil. Since the short-lived martial law attempt on December 3rd, there have been repeated impeachments and there have been unprecedented arrest and detention of a sitting president. So this ongoing crisis has fueled concerns about the so-called Korea passing, where Korea might be left behind, alienated from its U.S. and its allies. So in turn, we're having this special webinar to discuss how U.S.-ROK alliance and bilateral relations might endure these challenges under the second Trump administration. So with that, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our two panelists today. We're honored to welcome Major General Lee Levy, retired of the U.S. Air Force, and Ambassador at Large, Chun Kwang-woo. Thank you both for your participation. General Levy has had a distinguished career in the U.S. Air Force, including his service as the commander of the Air Force Sustainment Center. He's a highly sought-after expert on national security issues and has advised numerous U.S. government agencies, including the Department of Defense and NASA. General Levy serves as the president of CEO of the Levy Group, which addresses security policy, global supply chain issues, and airspace and cyber issues for both the public and private sectors. With him, we also have Ambassador at Large Chun Kwang-woo, who has had a distinguished career as a leading expert in global economics, having held high-ranking positions in both the private and public sectors. Ambassador Chun's previous roles have included Minister of the Financial Services Commission, Chairman of the National Pension Service, Chairman of Deloitte Korea, and International Finance Ambassador for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Thank you both, General Levy and Ambassador Chun, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me join.
Great. So we'll just dive right into the questions. So today is the inauguration of President Trump, and it's still ongoing. And it's clear that, as experts have predicted, that he would have major policy initiatives in not just the first 100 days, but in the first 100 hours, so it seems. And these are going to be quite impactful, not just within the United States, but also abroad, including South Korea. So starting with you, General Levy, in your view, what do you consider to be kind of the most critical issues currently facing U.S.-ROK relations now that President Trump has returned to the White House?
Very good. First of all, again, thank you for letting me join. It's an honor to be with both of you and to address our viewers. First of all, I would offer that the President Trump has said publicly, now remember, I'm not in the administration, so I read the papers and watch the news and talk to people as well. But, he has said publicly that he wants to make sure that on day one, he hits the ground running, not only with the people that he puts in particular appointments, but also with some of his policies. And today has certainly been, he's lived up to that. I'll leave it at that, with a number of executive orders and some proclamations in his speech at the inauguration. But to your specific question about what's the most critical, or what are the most critical issues, there's a lot of discussion about what is President Trump going to do economically, what's going on with the domestic politics in Korea. I think probably most of us think that the most critical issue is the solidarity and firmness of the alliance and making sure that we keep that healthy. And I think that the administration feels that it is healthy and certainly doesn't want to do anything to undermine that. But okay, Levy, why would you say that? Because the threats that face Korea and the U.S. and Japan as part of the trilateral don't go away because we have a new president. The risks and the threats don't go away because there are some political challenges going on inside of Korea. We simply have to look to the north, to North Korea. We simply have to look over towards China. And I would suggest that with respect to the U.S.-Korea alliance, we should continue to keep looking past China to Russia and Iran as those countries have continued to work more and more together to undermine Western interests. So I think the most pressing issues are, frankly, the continued health and blossoming of our security alliance. And then we can continue to talk about economic things or political things or trade things. But I think that's the first order of business. We learned very early in the military environment that without security, there is no economics. And that applies at the micro and the macro level. So that I think is probably, if I had to sum it up into one issue, that would probably be how I would characterize it.
Understood. Thank you so much. I really, I think it's interesting you pointed out that these threats, particularly security threats, exist regardless of the political developments. Ambassador Jun, what are your thoughts about Washington and Seoul? What should Washington and Seoul focus on first?
Okay. Thank you for inviting me again. And also, just before General Levy has outlined the key issues that we have to deal with in the beginning of Trump 2, and very adequately highlighted the point, that is that more than anything else, it is absolutely critical time to reaffirm the importance of the solidarity and the alliance between United States and Korea, and also Japan. We will look forward to talking about that part as well. It is unfortunate that we are undergoing here in Korea some political turmoil or leadership crisis, as some put it. But I must say that we have a tremendous track record in Korea, successfully coping with challenges, crisis, whether political or economic. So I'm confident that we'll come out strongly out of this disturbance. But in doing so, it is so very critical that U.S. Firm support, interest in the stability of South Korea and Korean Peninsula, that trust that we Korean people feel from the United States is very fundamental to move forward with a stable political environment in the right direction. So that's the point that I would like to emphasize here.
No, thank you, Ambassador. That's a very interesting point that both of that's something that General Levy also talked about, that political developments doesn't mean that these security issues go away. And then you also mentioned that you have a lot of confidence that the current political turmoil isn't going to last long enough for there to be a kind of a difference on how the U.S. and South Korea have worked together in the past and will continue to do, probably so. To that end, let's talk a little bit about kind of what's going on in South Korea, because I think particularly for viewers in America, there might be interest in terms of what to expect. Ambassador Jun, you sort of touched on this, but what are some of the developments that Americans should be kind of aware of? What are some issues that they should kind of consider as this political turmoil? Because there are a lot of expectations that there will be some sort of impeachment conclusion in the spring potentially, and if President Yoon is removed, then there will be a snap election for the presidency. If he's returned to office, we also see media reports in the U.S. I believe it was CBS that had reported that President Trump had said that he would be willing to meet with President Yoon if he's returned, if the impeachment is turned down. So would love to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, the situation is still evolving, and a decision has to be made at the level of constitutional court in due course. So I should be careful about making any sort of prejudgment about the course of development in Korean politics. But I would like to say this. The current situation was triggered by President Yoon's declaration of martial law. That's for sure. Nevertheless, there's a long background to that decision, as Mr. Yoon contended. That was that the political environment, especially in the Parliament, National Assembly, has been very chaotic over the last few years because it's dominated by opposition party with more than majority share the National Assembly. So the incumbent president has struggled to push forward his policy agenda over the last few years, and it's martial law came out at the background of what I said just before. Now, the critical point here, although it's a rather sensitive thing, is about why this political division is so very severe here in Korea. As recent economist, UK magazine Economist put it, even if this this martial law issue is resolved, but the future would be very tough because the country is dangerously divided politically, in a way, ideologically. So that's the thing that we need to cope with. As you know, the Conservative Party is very much in favor of free economy, free democracy and market economy. That is constitutional value in Korea. Nevertheless, in doing so, PPP, People's Power Party, Conservative Party, tends to emphasize relatively more, on the importance of a strong U.S.-Korea relationship, and that's the fundamental background for their most of external diplomatic strategies. Whereas opposition party has different priorities. Their tendency has been and still more receptive, soft perhaps, on China or North Korea issues. So there is some division of thought or approach here. So the trouble that we have to cope with is inevitably affected by the position United States takes, because how congenially or supportively this U.S. tries to engage in Korean affairs, that could affect public perception or political environment. If not, a more hostile or more punitive approach will also affect public sentiment, in that case, rather negatively. So we have a rather unique, if you like, this political environment we have to deal with. I understand U.S. counterparts and its leadership would be mindful about this situation as well.
Thank you, Ambassador. I guess in light of this, General Levy, I guess the main question for many South Koreans is, what is Washington thinking about all this? And I think they would be very interested to kind of know or have an insight into, or at least a preview into what President Trump is thinking and what the incoming administration is thinking about. But if based on your relations and having worked with in the U.S. government, what do you think is the general overall view of the situation in South Korea?
Well, first of all, Ambassador, I thank you for capturing that very, very articulately for the viewership. So maybe as a scene setter, you might or might not be surprised to know at how much this isn't necessarily reported on in the United States in the media, right? If you sort of look at the U.S. media as in total, and you look at the major networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, or CNN, or Fox News, or MSNBC, there's just not that much reportage, and it's mostly been going on in the backdrop of what's going on in Israel with the hostage releases and the negotiations, with the wildfires in California, with the Russia-Ukraine. So I would venture to say that unless Asia Pacific affairs are something that you're interested in, many Americans probably have only heard just a teeny tiny soundbite of it. So from a policy, but I'll come back to how the policymakers might view it in a moment. Ambassador, you talked about the conservative and the PPP being sort of heading in opposite directions politically and policy wise, and that it's a divided electorate. I would say that the U.S. has some similar experience with a divided electorate and contentious elections, et cetera. I think so. Everyone has their own opinion of then former President Trump or President-elect Trump's legal challenges that have gone on in the backdrop between his first term and second term. So we are not immune from that kind of turmoil automatically in our country either. So I would offer that to you as a point of consideration. So I think to your more macro question, how might the administration view it? If I'm not mistaken, when President Trump came into office last time, there was an acting president. Forgive me for not using the right term. Interim president, acting president, I'm not sure the right terminology, and our relationship got off to a good start. Remember, we, the U.S. and Korea and Japan as part of the trilateral, we have a permanent interest in here, right? We may have transitory political challenges in our countries as parties rise and fall and political turmoil percolates through. That's the very nature of democracy. Some could argue this kind of turmoil is the sign of a healthy democracy. You probably could ask 10 people and get 11 different answers, but the fact that there is this kind of discussion and dialogue and friction going on in the Korean body politic, to some extent, may be a pretty good sign of an engaged and active population, and not just a ruling element. But that's for the Korean people to decide amongst themselves. What I would offer is that the U.S. is committed to Korea, committed to the relationship, committed to the security constructs that exist in the region, and that, I wouldn't begin to speak for the administration because I'm not in the administration, but I know one of the things that I think about from having worked in the political military sphere is as long as there's transparency in the political process, I think most outsiders, external countries and outside allies are much more tolerant. It's only when there's obfuscation and deception, I think, is when you tend to find your friends getting uncomfortable. I don't think that's the case here necessarily. That isn't what I was trying to imply, but I just think that the administration would probably say more transparency is better than less, if I had to put a circle around it.
Oh, that's very good point. That 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 we often think that democracy, despite the process of leading to a consensus, that it can be quite messy or it can be quite loud. And that's certainly a good lesson that we got to keep in mind. You mentioned that, I guess, in the backdrop of Israel and what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, that this issue is probably not as that the American public is probably not as familiar about this issue at large. To that end, I guess we can kind of pivot a little bit to an issue or a country that Americans are more aware of, and that's to some degree North Korea. Obviously, that they're more aware of North Korea in a far more negative way than South Korea with K-pop and K-drama and all that. But I guess so. If we are to pivot a little bit, I mean, they've been in the news a little bit more, fighting for that attention. They got over 12,000 troops in the Russian-Ukraine border, who are engaged in combat, with a lot of news coming in about the horrific deaths because they're not well equipped or prepared.
Yes.
And then they also claimed a couple of weeks ago that they launched successfully this hypersonic missile. So to that end, I guess, General Levy, let's start with you. What are sort of your predictions for North Korea policy in the second Trump administration? And I guess added that, or what would you recommend as North Korea policy as well?
Yeah. So first of all, I might set the record straight on one thing you said, which is I wouldn't say people aren't as familiar with Korea or South Korea. I would say they just may not be familiar with this particular, I'll call it, political turmoil that's occurring today. I think most Americans are very, very well aware of who, what, where Korea is, what an ally they are, how we're connected economically, and maybe less so militarily, because most Americans just assume security happens. They don't always know how it happens, right? So I think that's important. They're very aware of the Republic of Korea and who they are and what their importance to and value and friendship, longstanding friendship with the United States. Just maybe not this I'll call it temporary political disruption that's going on. Okay, to North Korea. Golly, I could talk for an hour on this. First of all, whether they've launched a hypersonic, I'm not sure that I have. I mean, I read the same press that you read. You can kind of believe what you want to believe. Here's what I would say, though, and here's the cautionary tale to not. First of all, you should never underestimate your potential adversaries. Right. And I don't know how it's reported commonly in South Korean media, but sometimes in North Korea, or in North Korea is reported in US media is kind of the hapless crowd, right? Not kind of the folks who really don't necessarily have it together and almost cartoonish. And the worst thing I think you can do is mock your enemy or mock a potential adversary. Regardless of your views on North Korea politically, historically, et cetera, what they have been able to do is innovate, adapt, fail, innovate, adapt, right? Like it or not, they have been able to move the ball down the field from a missile technology perspective. And that poses threats to all of us. Right, that whether or not you believe they have an intermediate range ballistic missile that could hit Guam or not. Obviously, they're overflying Japan with some of their launches. That's very disconcerting to the Japanese. Clearly, it's disconcerting to us as well. So don't. I'm not counseling you. This is a cautionary tale for all of us. But to not be dismissive about North Korea and its capabilities. I'm going to take it to the next level now. So as North Korea has sent 10, 12,000, depending on what number you believe, troops to fight with Russia in the Ukraine war, clearly the North Koreans didn't do that without some expectation of a return favor of some sort. Right. There is some or will be some quid pro quo. And when you look at the technology transfer that has come out from Iran to North Korea and Russia to North Korea, as reported in open sources, that should be alarming. And I would expect that the North Koreans are expecting from the Russians even more technology transfer as a part of their contributing troops to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So that gives me pause as the North Koreans continue to iterate and improve their weapon systems. What is not helpful to South Korea, Japan, the United States, anyone in the region or anyone on the planet is for them to accelerate their technological development of weapons of mass destruction. That serves no one's interest, certainly doesn't serve economic or military or the interest of humankind. So with that as a backdrop, I think President Trump's administration is going to be keenly interested in engaging with North Korea. You remember there was the I don't know if summit is the right word, but there was the meeting between the North Koreans and ostensibly an agreement to disarm or at least not continue to arm. And those sort of fell by the wayside. And there were some pretty tense moments during the first Trump administration where I think most of the people in South Korea and many of the people in the United States thought that we collectively might end up in another shooting conflict or resumption of hostilities with North Korea, and none of us really wants to see that happen. As a reminder for our listenership, there are many thousand U.S. troops stationed in Korea, and their families are there. They're all within ranging distance, not all, but many are within ranging distance of North Korea weapon systems. And so, and that's part of the strength of our ongoing alliance, frankly, right? So I think the administration will be interested in engaging with North Korea, maybe trying to pick up a little bit where they left off, because I think the stakes are higher now, given North Korea's technological advancement and their close relationship with Russia, Iran, and you could argue maybe even China. And I'll pivot for a minute to China, and then we can come back to it later if you'd like. Remember, the more we're consumed, U.S. and Korea, the more we're consumed with worrying about things in North Korea, the less we're concerned with pursuing China's behaviors and things like first or second island chain or trade problems or trade frictions, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that and yield the microphone to the ambassador.
Great, thank you, General Levy. I guess the challenge here for many South Koreans, having experienced the first Trump administration and the summits that they had or the meetings and including the President Trump's visit to the demilitarized zone in the last sequence of events. I think many South Koreans, having seen that, are sort of thinking, well, if U.S. and North Korea relations can kind of improve to a point where North Korea is willing to denuclearize, dismantle their nuclear weapons, that's a great outcome. But I think the reality is that in order to keep their regime up, that they're not going to be willing to give up nuclear weapons, then I think many South Koreans, on probably both sides of the aisle are kind of thinking, well, then maybe we should ask U.S. to redeploy nuclear weapons or strategic resources to South Korea. There's a lot of opinions about that. Or maybe we should try to persuade the U.S. and other allies in the region to, build a nuclear weapon of its own. So not that that's a government policy, but there's a lot of opinion about that in South Korea. So kind of before coming to you again, General Levy, I would like to ask Ambassador Chun, if the Trump administration were to kind of re-engage North Korea in its second term, how do you think the sentiment will evolve in South Korea and provided with all this political turmoil as well?
Well, I think put it simply, I think the sentiment over here would be rather mixed feeling about what we can get out of this another summit between Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un. Because on the positive side, as you said earlier, and General Levy said as well, may have some high expectation for breakthrough in this reducing North Korea's nuclear threats. And Trump may create the kind of momentum we need to change the course. But at the same time, there will be much suspicion down here because of the experience with the first summit several years ago, and also the way North Korea behaves since then. Most recently, as indicated earlier, they expanded military alliance with Russia. That's another so-called axis of evil countries. Now, what that means is that in return, they must be planning to beef up, strengthen their capacity to attack or to be a more powerful source of military arrangement. So mixed feelings are there, but most people may be leaning toward, South Korean people may be leaning toward the second part, the skeptical part, or more shadow side of such summit if take place. So I think the important part here, especially whenever we talk about U.S. North Korea summit, there's a great feeling that it's very dangerous for South Korea to be missed out in this dialogue because, after all, we are the most critical counterpart in this sort of North and South peace talks or any sort of provocation from the North.
I would agree, and I would offer two additional thoughts. One is, often when we talk about North Korea capabilities, we tend to talk about missiles and nuclear weapons of mass destruction. I would be remiss if I didn't mention North Korea's malign influence in the cyber sphere. North Korea is a well-known perpetrator of all sorts of cyber mischief, and Ambassador, to your point about their collaboration with the axis of evil of Russia, who is also a cyber bad actor, if you want to say it that way. That I think poses some additional risk for all of us. And then lastly, I would say, generally, it's better to have some kind of communication with an adversary or potential adversary than no communication with an adversary or potential adversary. I think we learn or relearn, depending on which administration and what period in history, that if you don't talk to somebody that you're not getting along with, somebody else will, and that's how those negative alliances form. So it's better to engage. And I think for us as a trilateral, I think it's important for us to collectively manage our own expectations, both at the government level and at the citizenry level. Just because we get all the nation's leaders in a room doesn't mean that there's automatically going to be a giant success or giant step forward. And I know to many of the Korean people, they have family and long-standing cultural and familial ties with people in the North, and would like to see a day come when the political and security environments are different.
Got it. Thank you both, Ambassador and General Levy. I guess we could pivot a little bit, considering that I know it's a lot to cover, but to in General Levy, your point about cyberspace and and engaging North Korea so that somebody else doesn't engage, and it makes friends. I think it's a nice leeway into talking about China, because as we both know, aside from military threats or kind of more traditional security threats, we see China as engaged in a lot of weaponization of its economy, weaponization of its strategic resources. To that end, we are expecting, quite a bit of, I guess, a push from China. And back in, I believe, December of last year, Beijing went ahead and banned critical mineral exports to the U.S., for example. In the past, they've also engaged in several economic sanctions against South Korea over the deployment of THAAD missile defense systems. So, and so there are a lot of questions about what China is going to be like in the second Trump administration. To that end, if we can start with kind of what China is doing with its strategic resources, General Levy, as I understand that there's been a lot of concerns in the U.S. about what they're doing with export controls to the U.S. and possibly other allies as well. I would love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. Again, we could probably do an hour just on the strategic minerals piece. So the Chinese, no surprise here, they have a command economy, and they wield it like a blunt stick sometimes to encourage or discourage participation in certain activities. When you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, when you look at their expansion in South America, when you look at their uh, uh, ownership participation in certain key mineral mines in on the African continent, what you realize is that they've got a considerable amount of the US, of the global supply of important minerals tied up. Okay, we can spend an hour talking about how did we get here, but we are where we are, as they say. I think for us collectively, as Western powers and Western economies, and certainly within this trilateral arrangement, I think for us, what we need to do is look for alternative sources, and it's kind of a multi-pronged attack. One is engage our collective scientific communities to do research and development that bypasses the need for some of these things. The same time, I think there's until such a day when that occurs, I think it's incumbent upon us as Western nations to find alternative sources of these different minerals and natural resources. For example, some of these things exist in the United States, physically exist in the United States, but for various political and environmental and economic reasons, haven't been extracted or processed, et cetera. I think various countries have to make some commitments to do that amongst themselves and amongst others as trading partners. I think that's really important. And third, we have to understand the economics of it. For example, one of the things that China seeks to do is control access to space through the access to critical minerals. Right. When you look at what's required to launch and into space and sustain in space, many of those kinds of things, gallium, zirconium, yttrium, rhenium, et cetera, they're all essential elements. And to the extent that they can slow down Western economies, they can leverage their position into space. So I think finding those alternative sources and extracting them where possible while continuing to apply pressure to China and be very loud on the world stage about China's dumping of its minerals on the global economy, which they're very prone to do, right? If they see a Western company starting to develop a capability, using their command economy, they'll subsidize Chinese industry to drive the price so low that the Western business goes out of business. I think what we the West and our economies and both at the and our nations at the diplomatic and economic levels, we need to be a little more sophisticated about how to rebuff that than we've been in the past. That said, I'll close with this one comment: the Chinese economy is not 10 feet tall and bulletproof, as they say. right? The Chinese economy has some significant weaknesses in it. We don't have time to get into them all here, but I think we could just say that as a fact. And they have a population problem. When you look at their birth rates, there's a huge demographic reckoning coming in China. I say all that to say that as we look at the economic issues beyond some of these natural resource things, but at the economics at a macro level, the Chinese want to control the world economy and prevent us collectively from doing things we want to do. But they're trying to do this very delicately because they also understand that this is a bit Newtonian. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, and they want to make sure that they don't precipitate some sort of economic amplification inside of China. And the ambassador is a far more accomplished economist than I, so I'll be quiet now and let him tell me how wrong or right I am, and let him build on it with more facts.
Thank you, General Levy. Ambassador John, how serious is China's capability to kind of weaponize its resources, and is South Korea kind of taking it seriously in terms of what we should be doing?
All right. Before I respond to your question directly, perhaps let me share with you, sort of big picture of what's really happening in Chinese economy. As General Levy just said, the situation is not as great as many think or as they hope, because I've been looking into this Chinese economy for decades. During my World Bank days, I made frequent trips to China. There was late 80s and early 90s, that period of time, only part of their reform and opening sort of period, Dong shopping period, and soon after that. Historically, they made a remarkable growth over the decades. But, especially since the COVID-19 period, so 4 or 5 years ago, that turned out to be an important crossroad, a reflection point. That is that their growth has been weakening persistently. As General Levy said, there are several structural issues behind, including declining population. Labor force is important for China's economy because relatively cheap labor cost is an important ingredient for their competitiveness in the global market, and also property defaults. And excessive debt on the government level, especially regional government. This all, major component of a macroeconomy have been under tremendous stress. I say this because the Trump 2.0 period, the China's economic capacity is much weaker than during Trump 1.0, because even this year, consecutively from last year, they have a deflationary environment, meaning that literally in nominal term, they are contracting now the overall production capacity wise. So this has some geopolitical and security related issues to be raised from that side, because as someone put it, if China is becoming weaker economically, then ironically, that may be a source of increasing geopolitical threat. That's a typical peak China theory. now that may happen. That war or that provocation may not necessarily come from economic or military side, because it could be like restriction on precious metals and all other parts of confrontation could be triggered by Chinese authorities. So we may like to keep those things also in mind when we pursue this high tariff policies and force in the coming weeks or days, and in Mr. Trump's mind, because now if 40% or 60% of very high tariffs are imposed on Chinese exports, some estimates say that that will literally halve China's growth this year and coming years. What that means is that there is very serious economic impact. Not only that, very serious China's domestic social issues could be raised from that policy, and also the dumping issue General Levy mentioned is actually felt by many countries around the world. Korea has been suffering from very low cost export dumping of steels and chemicals to Korea and then also to other countries. So domestic industry has been suffering from that as well. So this whole dynamics could be more, very, very burdensome to many other economies around the world. That's what we have to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think one point that I would like to tease out a little bit more that you said is that as China has more economic woes, that it might try to do more in terms of its weaponization of economy and resources. So I guess part of that is sort of this fueling concerns about what China is doing in overseas markets. And I think one of the most recent examples that kind of Korea is still going through is this fear of over the corporate control dispute involving a Korea zinc company when there are drawing concerns that its acquisition possibly involving Chinese investors would lead to more Chinese control over minerals like zinc, nickel, and other things. And so kind of to that end, I think there have also been concerns raised in the US, and I would just kind of love to hear from you, General Levy, like as in, is what should the second Trump administration kind of do about trying to make sure that not just US, but its allies are not being exposed to kind of this Chinese weaponization strategy?
Yeah, again, that's a great question, and we could probably do several hours just on that alone. But if I had to sort of hit a couple of high wave tops, I would say, first of all, we have to make our own investments, right? Invest whether it's zinc or some other precious metals or rare earths, whatever. We have to make our own collective investments. All right, we have to realize that that's a cost of doing business. We also have to find ways to make it uncomfortable for the Chinese. Right. Until it's uncomfortable for them economically or politically, then there's no motivation for them to change. One of the, we can turn their weaponized economy back on them if we do this correctly, I believe. And that makes it very uncomfortable for Xi Jinping, right? He is balancing domestic issues and economic issues and global security issues. And, I think we could potentially push that a little out of balance and make him a little more comfortable at home, which would then ameliorate his behavior. But until we're willing to invest, counter-invest, if you will, then we will continue to have to deal with this. I think it's important to understand the Chinese theory of victory, right? They believe that an economy is a weapon, just like an airplane or a ship or a tank, right? And if you can achieve your final goal without firing a bullet or dropping a bomb, then so much the better, right? And so that's sort of how they think about it. So I think we, as Western economies and as allies and partners, have to think about what is our theory of victory, so we can apply pressure back to the Chinese and not just wring our hands collectively. So I think that's what I would say. And I'll just close this piece of it with, the Chinese own a lot of U.S. debt. They aren't the number one holder of U.S. debt. But the last thing they want, again, this is the balancing act piece, right? The last thing they want is for the U.S. economy to be so lopsided that we aren't making debt payments, or that runs the risk of punishing the Chinese economy and then rippling back into their internal affairs. So they are juggling a few things all at once to try to keep this some sort of status quo. So, Ambassador, your thoughts?
Well, as you said, this if Chinese authorities under tremendous pressure, and that could backfire in a way that is internal instability there as well, because recently there is some interesting observation by analysts about how serious China's domestic environment moving. They track the number of demonstrations going on around the country. Now that has been growing up quite a bit. That's the reports coming out. So now they, the policy tools, they have very limited policy tools in China, because it's already too much indebted. They have very reluctant to issue government bonds which could worsen their fiscal position. And the monetary side, they also have little scope, because interest rate is already too low. So in that situation, they have struggle internally as well. Speaking of U.S. debt, also related to this whole dynamics, that is that one possible retaliation that I was thinking was that has been around is that China now holds about $4 trillion worth of U.S. assets. Mostly dollar assets, foreign assets. Their foreign reserve is officially little over $3 trillion. And state banks and export companies, collectively, they have something like $1 trillion US dollars. Now, one of the possible weapons, perhaps they may be thinking, is that if too high tariffs have undue, this intolerable amount of pressure on them, they may try to disturb international financial market by selling U.S. securities. So this is another sort of angle here when you sort of manage risk side of the hardcore trade policy.
No, thank you both for a very in-depth analysis of the U.S.-China dynamics, as well as how China may try to retaliate in terms of utilizing its advantages in their economic war chest, so to speak. I realize that we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to combine my last couple questions together and ask you both. So, having explored all these different issues, putting yourselves in the chair of advising both the U.S. and the Republic of Korean governments, Korea's governments, what would you offer as kind of these should be the priorities, and this is you should think about how to this is a solution that you can think about on how to resolve differences, ranging from it could be tariffs to engaging North Korea and so on. So let's start with you, General Levy.
Sure. Well, thank you. So if I were asked to sort of summarize it in a thought or two, I would say the U.S., Korea, and Japan, we have a strong relationship, right? And politicians come and go, political cycles rise and fall, economics move back and forth depending on any one of them, 1,000 different factors. But what's important is the relationship and the shared common purpose, right? Free democracies, freedom of speech, freedom of trade, wanting a better life for our citizenry, a chance to develop and flourish and blossom. Trade policies and national security policies that support that, I think, never go out of fashion. They don't rise and fall with the political seasons, and I think that's why these relationships and these between our countries have endured and been so strong for so long. So I think my comment would be stay the course, right? It's working. It has worked and will continue to work, and whether we like it or not, or the pace at which it works, we do put pressure on our adversaries, like the Chinese, like the North Koreans, like the Russians. Maybe there are places we like to put more pressure or less pressure. Allies. Every family doesn't agree on everything all the time. If you have a family, you know exactly what I mean. But that doesn't mean you don't have your family with you. And that's exactly how I view it. That's exactly the advice that I would give if asked by any of our national policymakers. We have a long tradition of collaboration and cooperation, and anybody that thinks that the Pacific is going to be less important going forward is probably living under a rock somewhere and doesn't understand how the world really is. So that's what I would say. So I'll just close my piece by saying thanks for letting me join you and for being a part of this. What a tremendous opportunity and an exciting time in our nation's plural collective histories. The future is bright for us all. So I'm far more optimistic than I am pessimistic. Thank you.
Thank you, General Levy. I think the point about staying the course, that it has worked before the U.S. ROK alliance and will continue to do so. I think that's a great message. Over to you, Ambassador. What would be your advice to the leaders of both governments?
Well, now I would like to make a comment on the 2 points here. One has to do with North Korea, how best we should deal with North Korea, along with the United States, and trilateral partnership. Speaking of trilateral partnership, why that is strategically very helpful for the interest of United States. Let's take an example of shipbuilding industry that has been referred to very frequently lately. Now, if you look at the capacity of shipbuilding around the world, it's of course China is the leading country. That's more than 50% of the total, followed by Korea and Japan. Essentially 3 countries in the world. They are the major players. Now, if U.S. needs cooperation from shipbuilders, from not adversaries, but alliance countries, you could find essentially only 2, Korea and Japan. Now, so if you effectively mobilize the capacity of these 2 countries' capacity, then very effective cooperation between the 2 countries on that sector is quite important. rather than we compete each other or we think otherwise. So we put this trilateral cooperative apparatus very effectively. It's so very important for the interest of United States and for the peace of Northeast Asia. That I wanted to mention. The other, regarding North Korean issues, now quite a few related issues could come up, even including burden sharing issues to support U.S. troops here in Korea. Now, I think, Korea is not a money machine, as described by Mr. Trump, but it's well-advanced countries, I must admit. Now is one of top 10 economic powers in the world. And also, we do generate quite substantial trade surplus with the United States as well. We have to admit that. Mm-hmm. So we should be able to have a more fair burden sharing on that part. In doing so, we may also look for something in return. That is that we need much stronger deterrence capacity against North Korean provocations. That could involve some sharing of nuclear umbrella or even help South Korea have or develop a capacity to develop own nuclear weapons. Because after all, nuclear weapons are essentially defensive weapons. So to have a stronger defensive system in the South, I hope that may be considered. Because as someone put it, after all, developing nuclear capacity may be very cost-efficient deterrent mechanism than otherwise. So that's my second point. Not in addition to we should be ready. Korea should be ready actively supporting the strategic need of the United States in shipbuilding or defense area or even precious metals. We should be ready to be more accommodative for the interest of our strongest, most important ally in the world.
And I would offer, I think that sharing, burden sharing can be expressed in a whole bunch of different ways, right? We tend to think of it as a monetary expression, but there are industrial expressions, political expressions, et cetera. The other piece is, a great example of a great company, Hanwha, which has now recently signed a contract with the United States Navy to do ship overhaul. Back to your shipbuilding comment or ship repair comment, Hanwha will do ship overhaul of U.S. Navy of certain category of Navy ships in Korea. I forget the port where it will be done, but I know it's going to be done in Korea. And if I'm not mistaken, they also just bought the Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, the Philly shipyard, and are going to work with U.S. authorities to make ships, principally for the military, but here in the United States. So there are a myriad of ways where the skill and expertise of the industrial powerhouse that is the Republic of Korea in the shipbuilding arena can absolutely benefit the United States.
Okay, that's a great point. Yeah, MRO related business also. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you both, General Levy and Ambassador Chun. I think listening to both of you today, I think our viewers will have a good sense of the challenges and the issues ahead. But at the same time, I think the message is clear from both sides that the path forward is based on cooperation and the alliance, which has served us so well for the past so many decades. And that I think it's important to remember that despite challenges like North Korea, despite challenges like China, its weaponization of strategic resources, metals, But there are ways to collaborate, like what you just said about MRO and shipbuilding, many different ways of expressing the burden sharing between US and South Korea. So I think there's a lot that we can look forward to. And thank you again so much for your sharing your insights today. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we hear from you. And so we would love to extend our invitation back to our next webinar, or perhaps a symposium in person as well.
Okay.
I would be honored. I'm always honored to join the ambassador. He's the real intellect in the discussion here.
Thank you very much, General Levy. I hope to see you in person in not too distant future.
Me too.
Okay. Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you to our viewers and TVCHOSUN for making this special webinar possible. Thank you.